love to introduce Professor Marc Zimmer, who is a distinguished professor of chemistry at Connecticut College, where he combines a passion for research, writing, and science communication. The author of 7 acclaimed books, Zimmer's work bridges the gap between complex scientific ideas and the broader public. His insightful articles have appeared in major outlets. A prolific researcher, Zimmer has published more than 60 scientific papers exploring topics as diverse as cow flatulence, computational chemistry, and the bioluminescence of fireflies and jellyfish. He also curates the popular GFP website and shares his enthusiasm for glowing proteins and science outreach. Beyond his research and writing, Zimmer is the founder and director of the Connecticut College Science Leaders Program, an initiative dedicated to increasing the number of women and minority students who graduate with strong research experience and degrees in the sciences. Through his scholarship and mentorship, Zimmer continues to illuminate both the molecular and human dimensions of scientific discovery. And just for fun, I want you to know that this was written using ChatGPT. Right. Thank you, Professor.
Well, thanks for the introduction, and massive thanks to everybody else for coming through all the rain and for coming here. I really appreciate it. See some live people here. So this is a talk that I've given in numerous formats. The last time I gave it was a 10-minute dinner speech, which was all driven by quotes about AI. And before that, it was much more similar to this. I've given a couple of library talks. So what you'll see is a hodgepodge mixture of thoughts I've put together here. But basically sort of covering the idea about AI on the one hand, wow, this is what it can do. On the other hand, oh, I don't really like that. And so last time I gave this talk, my wife said, well, maybe you should start with the ending. And so if I had the choice, I use AI a lot. And if I could put it back in its box and close the top, I would. I didn't think it's a good idea to have all this computing power and the ability of what it does. So that's the end of the talk. So now I can just stop. Any questions? So what I want to start with actually is artificial intelligence, the word. It's actually a very bad sort of collective noun and not very useful word because it's so broad. And because it's so broad, it can be misused in many ways and misunderstood in many ways. So in this book, AI Snake Oil, which is a really good book by 2 professors from Princeton, and what it does is it tells you really what can you expect from AI, what can it do and what can't it do. But one of the things they say, just imagine there was another world, and in this other world, there were no words for cars, boats, ships, trains, bicycles. Everybody used the word vehicle. And so when somebody was talking about the environmental consequence of vehicles, you wouldn't know whether they're talking about bicycles or ships. And that's sort of the situation we're in with AI. AI is such a broad term. I mean, it is a calculator on artificial intelligence. In some ways, yes, maybe it is. Having this very broad definition can lead to AI being misused a lot. And one of the ways it gets misused is described in this book, the AI con, Emily Bender. She was the ethicist and moral leader of the moral division at Google until she decided, oh, this was a job she couldn't really have without doing what she wanted to do. And so she left or was fired one way or the other. She's a professor now at the University of Washington. And she basically says AI is used to hype things now. There's so many products, so many TV ads you see. They throw in the word artificial intelligence just to try and sell a product because everybody's looking at it. And it's also selling this culture of tech bros who are selling themselves and their products and their personalities. So maybe what should we be using? And so I think 2 words that we should probably be using is, one is machine learning and it's exactly what it says, where you have a machine, a computer learning something. So it's not a code where you write the code, the machine's learned it from data. There is a subset of this that's called deep learning, and that's where the computer learns in the same way as the human brain learns. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. But let's go to the beginning. So 2016, AI was just, or deep learning, machine learning was just getting to the stage where it was ready to go. And this professor at Berkeley, Andrew Ng, had this statement in which he gave in a lot of talks and wrote in a lot of articles where he said AI is like electricity. It's there. When electricity was first found, it was basically the same electricity we have now. We just had to find ways of using electricity. And in 2016, that's where the theory of AI was. It was all done. There was no more science, no more tech needed. We just had to find applications for it. And Kai-Fu Lee, who is the president for Google China, wrote a book a bit about the same thing again in 2018. And he also sort of said, wow, we're at this point in 2018 where AI is ready to go. At the same time, I wrote a book, and in my book, which was going to be called Good Science, Bad Science, Old Science, New Science, I had a whole part about new science. And one of the new sciences I was going to talk about, or wrote about a whole chapter, was about deep learning and how deep learning was going to come about. So this is about 2 years before ChatGPT came out and before everybody started sort of paying attention to AI. So how does machine learning work, deep learning? How does it do what it does? Again, there's another book that's really worth reading about AI and how it's like the brain. And the easiest way to think of it is to think of learning to do something. Just for example, catching a baseball. First time you catch a baseball, it's really difficult, right? The ball's coming up, you've got to figure out, wow, is it going to come up high? Is it coming up low? What's the angle? Do I have to go to the left, to the right? Where should I put, left hand, where should I put my glove? How do I catch this ball? And every time you do it, you learn a bit more. The first time you do it, your brain's totally overwhelmed with information. And as you get better and better, your brain actually has learned the least amount of information it needs to catch that ball properly. And so what it does, initially, it forms all these connections between neurons. They're called synapses. And just like a baby, it forms millions of synapses in a second. And that's why the first time you catch it, your brain is really overwhelmed. You're not quite sure what to do. But then as you learn more and more, one of the things that sort of decides is, oh, if you listen to the sound, that's not very important. So that's going to be a very weak connection. There's another connection that's the angle that the ball's coming, really important. Becomes a very strong connection and in a different layer. And so your brain learns how to catch through repetition. And so that's why I always tell my chemistry students, doing homework is really important because you learn how to do the same problems just like you do when you're catching a ball. And you can sort of look at this mathematically. You've got all your input, and in computer science, that's called training data, or your data set. You've probably heard about large language models. The data set was the internet, everything that was on the internet. And then you have an output, and you give everything a weight. And you say, oh, well, this is really important information, so it's got a big weight. This is pretty trivial, but it still plays a bit of a role, so you give it less of a weight. And then you get to the end, and you get the output. And the output, in this case, is catching the ball. Right? So all the information that goes in is how hard it hits, what the angle is the ground in front of you clear, can you go to your left, and everything. That all comes inside there. And so you have a computer doing that. Okay, so that's the science on the side. So let's have a look how this really started. So this is one of the most important players in the field, Demis Hassabis. Grew up in London. At the age of 4, he could beat everybody in his extended family at chess. At the age of 14, he was the second best chess player in the world. At the age of 15, he stopped playing completely and started playing with computers. He went on to get a graduate degree at the University of Cambridge in neuroscience, a PhD and a postdoc at MIT in computer science and then neuroscience as well. And then he started his own company, and you can guess what he did. Chess game. And what he did was he took 2 computers, 2 desktop computers, 2 normal cheap computers, and said, okay, these are the rules for chess. Play each other 1 billion times. They did that in 4 days. And then when you're doing that, the one computer is actually not playing against the other. It's watching the computer playing against itself, and it's taking those movements and putting groups of the movements and saying, hey, this is a good group of movements, especially in this situation, so it's really important. This one doesn't really work, not a good one. And so within 4 days, this computer taught itself how to play. And at the time, the best computer player was a program that was devised by IBM. It was actually code written on IBM Blue, the world's biggest computer. And it beat Garry Kasparov, the world champion, who said, this sucks. It's boring. It's only because it can do so many calculations. So when this little program that was called, really a good name, Alpha Zero, so the start of the start, when Alpha Zero played against this big IBM game, 100 games, it never lost. And it beat it, I think, 23 or 4 games. But the important thing was that Garry Kasparov, who had been the world champion, wrote this little piece in Science magazine saying, whoa, this is fantastic. It's got new strategies. It's doing chess that no one on earth has ever played before, and successfully. And so he wrote this thing and he said, chess, a Drosophila, a fruit fly of reasoning. And so fruit flies are used as models to look at science, and he was basically saying, oh, chess is a model of reasoning, and now the computer is playing chess, so we can sort of learn how that's happening. So you can see there it beat the stockfish, which was the champion, beat Kasparov. It does 70 million calculations in a second. And then AlphaZero beat it 28 times, tied 72 times, and it only did 80,000 calculations. Still maybe a bit more than a human can do, but nevertheless, it was just a cheapo computer against the biggest computer in the world. And yeah. So then Hassabis decided, okay, what should I do with my computer next? And it turns out Go is a lot harder than chess. Go is a very, very complicated game. It's a Chinese game. It's been played for centuries. And so they gave the 2 computers the rules, and the AI learned how to play chess. He called it AlphaGo and challenged the world champion, South Korean player. It is the most watched sports event in the world, more than the Super Bowl, more than Formula One, watched by nearly everybody in China, Bangladesh, all of Asia, lots and lots of people. And it was a very emotional game. 3/4 through the game, the South Korean champion started crying because not just for himself, he said for humanity, because he could see how this was going to beat him, and this was sort of the end. And this is sort of what's been called the Sputnik moment in China. This was the turning point for China. At this point, China hadn't really been looking at deep learning much, but after this point, they invested a lot of thinking power, brain power, money into deep learning. So that was sort of their changing point. At this point, the company that was making all of these decided, oh, we've got to do something that's a bit more better for humanity. And one of the biggest problems in biology was trying to figure out the shape of proteins. Proteins in your body, it's really the factory that makes everything and directs everything in your body, all the chemical changes. And most of the drugs bind to proteins or enzymes, and that then has a pharmaceutical effect. So if we know what the shape is, then it's responsible for the shape. And the crazy thing is, if you have a protein, no matter whether it's made in a human or a tree or a mouse, it always folds the same way. And sometimes it folds incorrectly, and then there's a disease associated with it. So most of the neurological diseases are through misfolding of proteins. So this is really a big problem. It's back when I was in university in the 1980s as one of the probably unsolvable problems in my lifetime. You can find out what the structure is by doing something called crystallography. To do a crystal of a protein probably costs about $80,000 and takes a year or two of work in the lab. So it's really expensive and difficult to do. In this database had about 200,000 structures that had been done, so at cost of billions of dollars. And so we had this training set, right? We had the sequence, we had the shape, so you could learn what it was. So of course you can guess what happened. This program called now AlphaFold. So we had AlphaZero, AlphaGo, AlphaFold, how proteins fold. You can see here the green is the crystal structure, which takes a year, lots of money to do. At the bottom is a computational prediction. They have exactly the same shape. And this computational prediction was done nowadays in about 10 seconds. You can do it for free online. So in science, this is one of the biggest changes. They've now figured out a whole bunch of other things. You can now see how a drug actually fits into it and how it would bind to it. So Nature in 2020, so this is still before ChatGPT has been released, had this article in which it says, it'll change everything. 2 years later, the entire protein use. So remember, it had taken all of humanity to find the structure of 200,000 proteins. The computer now calculated the structure of every known protein, which is more than 200 million proteins. They're all available in a big database. So this last year ended up with Demis Hassambas, you saw him as a young kid, winning the Nobel Prize. So they got the Nobel Prize for doing the protein folding. So that's sort of the scientific use, right? So you can see here in science, it's very effective because you have a sequence and you have a shape. There's no sort of uncertainty between the two. So let's have a look at the next big jump in sort of AI, the one that we've all heard about, and this is large language models. So in large language models, the training set is everything that's on the internet. And the idea was, hey, if we give computer a sentence, can we get the computer then to finish that sentence based on what it's learned on the internet, right? So I climb into my car and drive away, right? Would be a way that would end. Can we teach the computer to do that? But one of the things they did is they didn't just go onto the internet and grab, for example, all the Enron emails that were there, which turned out there were so many of them that they're actually parts of Enron language and way that people communicated in Enron that are in the early ChatGPT versions. But they also took all the illegal book libraries and publication libraries and used them to train ChatGPT. So it's a bit of like a thief, stealing all this information to learn how to do that. So I really like, this is Emily Bender again, she wrote the AI Con, and she said a large language model is a bit like a stochastic parrot. So stochastic in Greek means based on guesswork, right? So you give it a sentence and it'll try and finish it for you, but it's never 100% right. You never know if it's quite right. And so that's one of the problems with large language models. AlphaFold doesn't make many mistakes because the data is clean. It's a very narrow sort of field that it's looking at. ChatGPT tries to know everything, but doesn't know it that certainly. So it makes mistakes. So it's a bit like a stochastic parrot. So that sort of leads to this. I asked ChatGPT to draw this for me, and it drew me an iceberg. And so I'm not sure which is which, but it turns out that one of the biggest medical administration programs that has been sold to many, many states, including Massachusetts, for hundreds of millions of dollars, has turned out not to be able to do a thing, right? So because you never know what is going on in a large language model. So people sell them, and it really depends on how well they can sell a product. And so sometimes a lot of the AI products are absolutely hype. They're sold and they can't do what they promise. Others can. I like this quote about what artificial intelligence is. So Fei-Fei Li is a professor at Stanford, and she says, I often tell my students not to be misled by the name artificial intelligence. There's nothing artificial about it. AI is made by humans, intended to behave by humans, and ultimately impact human lives and society. So interesting, she doesn't correct the intelligence part. She corrects the artificial part, which is, I thought, sort of pretty interesting. So if we think about it, it shouldn't be surprising that large language models hallucinate because it's based on the human brain, on neural networks. And if you're all looking at me, you can see me, you can see that. Actually, your brain can't see everything. There's just too much information coming in from the optic nerves. And so it summarizes things for you and fills in gaps. And that's exactly what these large language models do as well. So one of the consequences in humans is we fall for optical illusions. So even if you've seen this optical illusion before, just pay attention to it and okay, count how many times the players are going to catch the ball. Like 1, 2, 3. Keep counting. Carry on. Count how many times they throw the ball to each other. Okay, so how many people saw the... Okay, how many of you saw the gorilla though? Okay, so there's a gorilla that walks through there, and your eyes don't count. But if you've seen it before and you saw the gorilla, did you notice that the color of the curtains changes? So what's happening? Yes, we're going to see it here. Okay, let's rewind and watch it again. Now watch. This is exactly. And okay, so you're counting, and he actually stops and looks at you, shakes your hand. But you were so focused on counting that you didn't see it. And if you'd looked in the back, you would have seen that the curtains change color as well. And so it's exactly the same thing. With large language models, they might have all the information, but they focused on something. So you'll get a hallucination. If you then ask it more precisely, it has the right answer somewhere. So dealing with large language models is a bit of an art. So this next one, what I want you to do, shows you the same thing, is I'm going to show you this. Have a look at one of these, and I'm going to make it this turn. So keep your eye on that. So did you see, as it turned, at 89 degrees, it still looked concave. At 90 degrees, it flips. But of course, in reality, it's just a drawing. And so again, what your brain is doing is your brain hates having to make a decision. Right? So, and actually hates even more uncertainty associated with that. And so what it's doing is it's telling you it's this way, even though it should know that there's a large proportion of this that's now flat. And in fact, at 90 degrees, it looks flat. And then, but it always wants to give you an answer. So it'll say it looks like this, it looks like this, and then suddenly it looks like that. And it flips for you. And again, large language models, they always give you an answer and very confidently give it as correct. Another thing that we want to know, and here I asked AI to give me a tie-dye version of a cartoon that explains what's called the jagged frontier of AI. And so the jagged frontier of AI is the fact that in most things that we have, most tools we use, we either know it works or it doesn't work. With AI, you can sometimes have it working really well for very complicated processes, and then not working at all for something that's pretty easy. And so here you can see it made this in less than a minute. But if you look here, it messed up the O, right? So it makes silly, stupid mistakes just because it's going so fast. But if you take time, I needed this drawing for an article I was writing, and it took me 2 hours to make this from scratch. And these are all unique drawings, so that pig with the yellow fluorescent snout, you know, I just said I wanted a pig with the yellow fluorescent snout and yellow fluorescent toenails, and it drew me that pig. And then I put it together for this article I'm writing. Would have taken me a couple of weeks probably, a year ago. Now I could do it in a couple of hours. And so I had to ask it to correct a few things and make very sure that it works. So something else that's really important about AI, if you think about what I told you, the history, if we go back to ChatGPT, 2022, 3 years ago, right? That's probably the time most of us heard about machine learning. So in 3 years, it's already grown into our lives so really quickly. And so Ray Kurzweil, who's a sort of futurist, writes really interesting thoughts, is also employed by Google, has said that if you look at governmental and educational change and the way we intuit things, that's always linear. But if we look at how science is changing and tech is changing, it's exponential. And then he sort of says, if I take 30 steps linearly, I go to 30. If I take 30 steps exponentially, I get to 1 billion. And so with these models, we have this thing that is growing so fast. So fast that we, as educators, can't keep up with it. Government can't keep up with it. And, well, I'll show you a few other things that really scare me about it. It also can lead to people saying things like this. So Jonathan Costa, he's the executive producer of my favorite podcast called Chat EDU. It's about using AI in education. And he says in a generation from now, we could be at the point where children don't have to learn how to read or write. And if you think about it, a lot of people already talk to their phones and use their phones. So with ChatGPT 5, you don't have to type in anything. You can just hold the button and you can say, write an intro for Marc Zimmer. He's talking at the Stonington Library. And it'll write it for you. You never even have to look at it. And so you can get to this point where you can get more information by just talking than not learning to read or write. I mean, I hope it's not true, but that's a possibility. So again, from Ray Kurzweil, is that AI will augment human intelligence, not replace it. And I think that's really the important part as an educator. I'd rather not deal with it at all. But if I have to, rather than ignoring it, I think it's really important for me to teach students how to use it, both constructively and ethically. And so that's really important. It's something that's Ethan Mullick, who's really in the education business about AI, calls co-intelligence. And some people have said that it's a bit like standing on Newton, when Newton said all the sort of discoveries were made by standing on shoulders of others. In this case, the human is standing on the shoulders of AI, and you've got to somehow be able to deliver something that the AI needs. And that's really going to be what you need in the sort of job market, in today's job market. This is maybe one of my sort of favorite quotes, Randy Bass. If you treat it as a vending machine, it'll act as one. If you approach it with curiosity, humility, and a sense of shared responsibility, it might hum a different tune. So a lot of AI is really how you speak to it and how you deal with it. So one of the things that many people are concerned about is how much energy does AI use, right? The brain uses about 20% of our energy. Small little thing here uses so much energy, and it's using that all the time. Well, here it gets really, really confusing because we hear a lot about data centers, but less than 5% of a data center is actually AI. So a data center, most of the energy it uses is for streaming things. It's our cell phones, taking all the data we have on the cell phone, the pictures we take, putting it up in the sky, and then, well, not really the cloud, and then sending it back to us. That takes a lot of energy. So when we talk about data centers, it's not totally AI. It turns out that time, minute per minute, using AI for a minute is the same as streaming Netflix for a minute. An hour AI is the same as Netflix for AI. But of course, there are a lot of people using it. At schools, about 80% of high school students are using AI at this point, at least for an hour a day. And that came from nowhere, right? So that's really a big, big problem. Water-wise, it uses less water than golf courses. So if you take all the golf courses and the water that they use, AI uses a little less. The data centers, more, right? A lot more. So we've got to be careful what we're really talking about. Are we talking about this machine learning, or are we really talking about Bitcoin? Bitcoin actually takes about 20 times as much energy as AI does, or AI. Bitcoin also all has to be, or Amazon, when we shop online. Right? All the Amazon data centers, box of computer here, this little part will do AI, this will do shopping. 2 hours later, they'll have switched. So it's all in the same thing. So here's what I'm worried about. It's not the power usage, but it's actually the power of AI. So I think if we should be worried about something, we should really be worried about how powerful it is. So Sundar Pichai, he's the CEO of Google, has said that AI has the potential to become more transformative than electricity or fire was. That's a lot of power. So here's my favorite quote. Jack Haldane, he was a biologist in 1926, and he was the first biologist to use math to model biological systems. And in this paper called On Being the Right Size, he said that drop a mouse from a building and it survives, whereas a rat is killed, a man is broken, a horse splashes. And he doing all of these calculations, basically, I mean, you drop a mouse from this high, nothing happens to it. You drop a bigger thing, it does get broken, it breaks bones. He also calculated that an elephant is on the biggest sort of size of animal that's possible to live on land, because it's got to pump its blood all over its body, whereas smaller animals are more efficient. And then you've got gravity. So if you go into the water, you can have a bigger animal. That's why whales are bigger than elephants. And so he did all of these sort of calculations. So if you take this to AI, my sort of reasoning is the stronger, more powerful it is, the quicker it is, the bigger the crash will be that we get from it when it makes mistakes. Bill McKibben, one of my favorite sort of liberal arts college professors, is at Middlebury, and he's written this book called Falter and Also Enough, in which he basically says every living organism on Earth grows to maturity and then stops growing. And so trees mature, they get a certain height, they don't grow past that height. Humans, right, you get 20, 25, you mature and you stop growing. So having a growth economy is really going against all the laws of nature. And so if you have something that's growing, maybe we should get to sustainability and stop growing it. And of course, AI is growing so fast, it's growing faster than anything else. It's also driving the economy right now. So it's really, really dangerous. Ian Golding, economist, and he was the Nelson Mandela's economist. He's now at Oxford. And he wrote this book, The Butterfly Defect, about how everything's connected. And if something goes wrong in one place of the world, it'll go wrong everywhere. So not butterfly effect, but defect. In it, this was written in 2014, he predicted that the next pandemic would probably start in a food market in the south of China. It would lead to supply chain issues, including people fighting about toilet paper, and that countries would be fighting about vaccines. So it's full of predictions that came true. But my favorite line of that is, with risk, or with progress, there's risk. And the bigger and the faster the progress is, the bigger the risk. And so what we've got is a big risk. If we look at ChatGPT 5, it just came out with this warning that a non-scientist will be able to use GPT-5 to make bioweapons. I mean, that's a lot of power, a lot more power than we want. Mustafa Suleyman was with Demis Hassambassis, one of the people who started the company that did the first DeepMind programs. So the AlphaGo, the AlphaZero, AlphaFold. But then they broke apart because he said, this is too dangerous, I don't want to carry on with this. And he's got this really interesting book called The Coming Wave. And in it, he talks about researchers who look at transitions in the world, discoveries that have changed the world completely. And he says there are about 15 discoveries that have changed the world completely, right? We've spoken about electricity, the steam energy engine is probably one, fire is one, a wheel is one. And we're the only generation that has lived through 2 and probably 3. Because if you think about it, the discovery of the internet, with cell phones, with GPS, all of that, that's changed everybody's life, the whole world. So that's one. And so then he says there are 2 others that are going on right now, and one of them is AI, and the other one is CRISPR, gene editing. And the problem with this is those two work synergistically. So you can use the power of AI to increase the genetic changes you can make and design new genetic changes. So this is great because we could solve climate change with this way, but it's also terrible because if something goes wrong or somebody uses it in the wrong way, like bioweapons. So, yeah. Just a month or so ago, the first virus designed by AI and then made using CRISPR. It's a virus that eats up bacteria, right? So the idea is a good idea. It could be used as an antibiotic. But still, the fact that you can design a virus that has a function is really, really scary. And so that's where I come with this power being very dangerous. Jennifer Doudna, who got the Nobel Prize for the invention of CRISPR, the gene editing, said, you know, what will we, a fractious species, whose members can't agree on much, choose to do with this awesome power? So that's sort of my conclusion on this. So I wanted to do this pretty quickly because I want to leave you with some options, some general questions to ask me about it. Or if you want to, I can show you a little bit about Notebook LM. It's probably the most useful form of large language model, especially for education. Deep research, which is crazily powerful, or making music with something called Suno. So if you want to ask me about any of those three, you can ask me about that, or any general questions. So, yes.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. My background is economics, so I look at this and say, this is going to affect the way or are we going to continue to go along and will be increasing, certainly in the United States. Very interesting.
So first of all, looking at different countries, this is certainly going to change the inequities we have, and they're going to get bigger. So my students can use Google's Notebook LM for free because they have an email that ends with .edu. They can use ChatGPT 5 for free because it's an educational. So these companies are trying to hook students young, knowing that they have potential to get jobs where they'll use AI again. When I go to South Africa, the emails end .co.za at Stellenbosch University. Those students can't use it. So already just looking at the students, there's an inequity of it. And if you, obviously the data centers are all on the northern hemisphere, not on the southern hemisphere. Economics is one of these things though where AI is not quite as good because the data isn't as solid, right? It's more, it's same with psychology, and it's more of a fuzzy science. And so it's really hard, but you can bet that the big trading houses, JP Morgan and all of, they're using AI because you can do calculations a lot quicker. You can find out what's happening a lot quicker. You can take huge data sets and get information out of it, and information that trends and correlations you haven't seen before. So yeah, I think what it'll do is China, Europe, and America, where these big companies are, will just get stronger and bigger, and the economies will grow faster because of this. I guess AI is driving the sort of economic growth now, and yeah.
So, there's been some articles recently about stock market bubble because of AI. So, just thinking about what you just said, as well as some other things that you said, let's say the stock market bubble bursts and there's a crash in that stock. Do you think that might have any effect on the reality of the usefulness of AI, or think those two things could be linked in any way?
I know very little about economics and things like that. From what I've read, a lot of this is sort of based on the fact, is the valuation of these companies legitimate? Can they make profit? Right? I think if you think back 15, 20 years at Facebook, everybody was saying, well, why are people putting so much money into Facebook? Why is the stock so high? What can it give you? Right? And then, of course, Facebook became Meta, but it's making oodles of money. And I suspect a lot of the bigger AI companies, there are ways of getting the money. It's really the companies that are selling an ability that they don't have.
Right.
They will just crash.
Right, the false promises.
The false promises, I think, yeah. And some other ones that are probably real because they just aren't strong enough and big enough yet. Will probably also go under.
Can you talk about number 3?
Billboard just has its first artist who's an AI created person, not existent. It's number 5 in the bestsellers, and she is in all categories of the billboards. And this is the first one that they know of.
What's that person's name?
Zanya Monet. So if you look up Zanya Monet,
It's not a person.
um,
Is that what you just said?
so Zanya Monet. Oh, okay. Oh, I haven't got internet here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it. If you could, yeah. So yes, she is an artist. I don't know, programmer. Who. So this program Suno is actually, you can use it for free, and you can. So the easiest way of doing it is say. Actually, I have a song from a library, a different library where I gave a talk, and I just said, so you can't say make a song that sounds like Dire Straits' Sultans of Swing, but you can describe the song, and then you can say, write me a song about a library talk that I'm giving, and that has a bass guitar, sounds like this and this and this, 1970s British pub rock, male vocals. And it'll make the song for you with your lyrics. You can change the lyrics.
I can't see your wife. My eyes are really bad and his screen is really small, so I can't see where we can connect.
Oh, so you,
Can I go up here?
yeah.
There we go. Here, can you, oh, I see it now. Sorry, my eyes. I don't have my reader.
Yeah, I think the easiest might be if you go.
If you go to the.
Yeah, there.
There you go. Okay. It's a focus.
Sorry.
Cancel that at all. Got it? I think you have to cancel all of those first.
How many brains does it take? AI would have gotten it in a second.
No, if I had my eyeballs,
There
that
you
would
go.
be nice to have.
Should I double press this maybe?
No, that's too
Okay.
So, I'm sorry,
So you should be on our guest one
Okay.
by now.
Come on, I want. Oh, that's Westwood Boulevard.
Yeah. And I'll.
So it's a buffering problem. Yeah. Yeah, so
Sorry.
Turn the mic off.
Oh,
Told me about them boys who wouldn't care. Didn't tell me what a real man sounds like. So I fell for the ones that lie just right. He never pulled my chair or checked my friends. Never showed me what to lose or what to defend.
So that's completely generated by AI. Now the video is actually in real human actors. So the woman who did this is from Mississippi. She actually came forward and said this is the process, and it's using the same program that's, well, it's okay. I won't, yeah. So yeah, so it's pretty easy to do. You can just say, describe the song you want and the voice you can have. For free, you get the version. If you've made 5 or 6 songs, you can sort of hear that they're AI. If you pay $20 a month, then you get the version like this, where you really can't hear that it's fake and it's not human. And you can say, you know, male, gravelly voice with a saxophone solo between this part and this part, and it'll put that in there.
Does this excite you or scare you?
Both.
I don't get excited. I'm scared stiff.
Yeah. So in this, I'm not as scared as I am about the stuff in my own area, the science area. So I'm a computational chemist. I used to write grants to use supercomputer at Oak Ridge, and I used millions and millions of CPU hours, and now I can do that in a minute online using AI. So that's the sort of power that scares me. It scares me a little, but not as much.
Well, I had a couple of questions, but specifically about that one that you just mentioned. Those results are based on as good as the starting data. Right? So if that data is not very good, the results will also be. How do you know? I guess it's good at interpolating, but not extrapolating. But
No.
in a structure it's never seen.
No, so I put in structures that no one's ever seen. We just know the sequence from isolating them and from sea organisms. It calculates the structures, and then I can, from what I know of those structures, figure out what color they'd be, and they're exactly those colors. So it does that, and then in some cases, the structure has been determined afterwards, and it's spot on. So, so the interesting thing is you can actually make it hallucinate. So you can design different shapes. So, and then you can go back from that and then make a protein that has a different shape, which could then do something else. It's incredibly powerful. And so,
Go backwards, like if you give it a protein shape.
yes, yeah. And so now the important thing is actually, if you know the shape, if we've got what's called an active site, we can design something that binds in there and use some that are already known to work in humans and change its shape just a little bit, which took years of lab work. And now you can narrow that down to maybe 1 year. So, yeah.
I listened to a guy named Cal Newport. Professor at Georgetown, about efficiency and stuff like that. But he talks a lot about the AI, and his opinion was that initially the large language models were exponentially growing in capability, but the most recent one was close to what they thought was better. And his sense is that they may have sort of topped out at that kind of growth. So and predicting a lot less impact than what people are expecting. So I don't know what your opinion I don't know. I don't know how you can take if it already has all the data in the internet. How are they making it applications or?
Yeah, so it learns. And so you can take all the chemistry and all the biology and put that in together with that now. And when it makes a mistake, teach it from itself. And it's getting better. But I think, so the big future is not in these big, broad language models that can do everything, but rather in very tight, specific programs or applications. Like the AlphaFold, or something else in economics, or something else where that's very, very useful. And the data is really reliable, and it does just that. And that's going to be, so yeah, again, the big sort of finance places like JP Morgan, and they have their own AI programs, and they have the divisions of AI people, probably in China or in India or something like that, where they do all the calculations and just for themselves.
What do you advise your students to focus on? Because a lot of people are getting the impression that it's going to take away jobs, right? So X-rays of the proteins, isolate the proteins.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all on the lucky end of where we don't have to worry about that much anymore. But for my students, right, it's really important. I think medicine, being a doctor, has got no future. My students don't want to believe in this. For example, in medicine, I think in 10, 15 years, we will all have monitors, if we want, in our blood. That'll monitor every single chemical, mineral, enzyme level, and send it to a computer that will then tell you, oh, watch out, Mark, you've been drinking too much Coke. Cut down on that caffeine. Or take these pills now. And that's how medicine will be. And when you go to the doctor will already have, it'll be like triage in a major. So I think something like medicine will change a lot. And so how can humans offer something? So it makes mistakes. And so the human has to be good enough to recognize those mistakes. Right? So if I got this from a doctor, I wouldn't recognize it as a mistake. I have to know enough medicine to realize, oh, that's the mistake. So you're really going to be using that like triage. When in triage you have somebody saying, hey, this is the most important injury, look at it, I think this is on, and then the doctor comes, the expert comes. And that'll be the human. And I think the other thing is this jagged edge, where humans have got to know, where is AI not going to do a good job, and where humans will be good. But I do think that in a lot of places, what you're going to find is the people who can use AI together with their own knowledge, they're the ones that are going to succeed in the job market. And so what that's leading to in the job market at the moment is that actually people who are in their 30s are the most desired people because they already have the knowledge that they've gained. And they're using AI, whereas young students who are coming out of university don't have enough experience. And so it's becoming harder for incoming students to find jobs in a lot of areas.
I was just going to say my daughter
Well, I think they're definitely right. Anything like delivering babies, anything that's physical, that's, yeah, completely safe.
Ask you about privacy. How do you view AI relationship with somebody's privacy? Their know-how, their knowledge, what they have gained through life experience. I feel that, to me, is the biggest affront to myself. I'm giving up something that took me a really long time to learn.
Yeah, I mean, so the privacy thing is really, so we're a Google campus at Connecticut College, so we use Google Drive, we use Google Docs, and we also use Gemini and Notebook LM. And they have a contract with the college that nothing that comes from the college is used in their training. Whereas ChatGPT, which is much more powerful in some ways for my research, has nothing like that. So I use it because it's just so powerful, and I do bigger calculations and bigger changes than I could with Google, and I know it's going to be used. So I mean, also as a scientist, I publish my things, and I want people to share them, to use them, right? So it's very difficult. So it's really interesting. Anthropic, which is the Claude manufacturer, settled a lawsuit saying that yes, they'd used the following information from the web that is copyrighted. And you could look how many of your writings were being used. And it was more than 80, I think it was 88 or 89 of my writings had been used. And I thought, oh, this is cool. That they used it, I thought it was interesting, but I'm supposed to get some money now. And a few weeks later, they said, well, yeah, all the peer-reviewed articles, all the money for everything that they used from there is going to the publishers. So the people who wrote it don't get it, but the publishers, Oxford University Press, Elsevier, Wiley, they're all getting this money. And it's only the books that I wrote where my publisher gets half and I'll get half. If, yeah, who knows how much money that is. So it's sort of interesting. There you can at least know how much they took. But I would never obviously put my credit card number or anything like that.
How do some of your humanities colleagues feel about ChatGPT? Because I feel like I hear a lot of professors struggling that their students are no longer writing their own papers, they're no longer doing the research, but obviously you found positive uses for it. So
yeah, I'm probably on the one extreme where I reluctantly use it, but I can see the use of it, and I can see how it certainly helps my students learn chemistry, without a doubt. But I'd say the majority of my humanities colleagues are not very happy, and yeah, I've heard someone utter the phrase, "I'll rather kill myself than use ChatGPT."
As
yeah.
a humanities person, what popped into my mind was the fall of the Roman Empire, that there's going to be a boom and bust of culture. But yeah.
So there's a really interesting article which says that if you're using AI, you should think of people who don't want to use AI as vegans. So if you're inviting friends to dinner and they're vegan, you aren't going to force them to eat meat. And we should deal with people who don't want to use AI in exactly the same reason. They have moral reasons, and we should respect those. And
It's
so,
the same argument that you can make when the onset of photography.
Yeah.
And you know, and how people felt that was going to destroy art in a way, and in fact it augmented it.
or books. Or,
Right.
yeah, there've been many times we've come to this. The only thing, this one's quicker and more powerful and more scary than any of the others. Yeah, yeah.
There you can see, it's obvious what is a photograph. I guess I'm wondering if there's any talk about laws to artists so that.
So right now, that's one of the reasons why if you use Suno, you can't say make a song that sounds like Dire Straits. You have to describe a new song. And the same with paintings. So you used to, when it first came up, I could say make a Van Gogh-like painting that would do this and show this. Can't do that anymore. You have to describe abstract or impressionist, pointillist with, But you, yeah, totally, yeah. And it would be derived from all of his paintings and similar paintings. Yeah. Yeah, again, it's interesting because in the sciences, right, everything's always on the shoulders of others. We always read everybody's papers, we use those ideas and try and extend from that. I think in the humanities, it's a lot more important to be more original. And so you get the sort of disciplinary difference.
Wow.
Yeah.